The Eidolon was a joke. Among the Allied Galactic Armada, a vast force made up of the most advanced species in the known universe, Eidolon was mocked. She was old, slow, and human-made. The name wasn't even feared. In fact, when it popped up on fleet rosters, officers of other species chuckled or sighed. "Scrap metal with a reactor," one Rithri admiral once called it. "Flying museum," added a Urel tactician, smug behind his 4 translucent eyes. Captain Doyle knew what they thought, and he didn't care. He wasn't a politician. He didn't care about interstellar rankings or species pride. He was a soldier, a tired, bitter one who'd buried too many of his own under the flags of peace treaties that meant nothing, one who knew how easily the galaxy forgot humans had bled for this so-called alliance. The Eidolon was his, not because he chose it. He'd been given this forgotten bucket of bolts as a form of quiet dismissal after refusing to obey a joint arms order that would have led to hundreds of civilian casualties during a border raid. Instead of a court-martial, they gave him the Eidolon, as if that was kinder. It wasn't. The crew? Barely 50. All human, all discarded. No elite cybernetic implants, no quantum field AI command net. Just guts, grit, and a patched-together hull. Half of the system still ran on manual. Engines groaned during every jump. And the ship's AI, if it could be called that, was a glorified diagnostics reader. But it floated. It fired. And to Doyle, that was enough. Then came the Kevolith. Insects. Massive, armored, hive-minded things. They didn't talk. They didn't negotiate. They consumed. Planets, systems, fleets, everything. Their hive ship, Devourer Prime, was the size of a small moon. It tore through the Delta Reach and cracked planetary shields like they were tissue paper. The Alliance panicked. They gathered their biggest fleet in history. Over 9,000 ships, 42 species. The Eidolon wasn't even invited. Doyle went anyway. He was laughed off the command bridge of the flagship, Yarvex Eternal, by Admiral Thren, the same one who once dismissed humans as barely evolved predators. Orders were given. The Eidolon was to remain back as supply escort. Non-combat. Doyle didn't respond. He didn't argue. He simply nodded and walked off. He had no illusions about his place in their war. The day the battle began, the stars dimmed. Kevolith ships blanketed the void like swarming hornets. Hundreds of them. The Devourer Prime glowed red from within, feeding on the radiation of dying stars it had already consumed. The Alliance charged like heroes out of some hollow film. They were slaughtered like insects. Their weapons did nothing. Their tactics failed. Thousands of ships were torn apart in minutes. The Yarvex Eternal was the first flagship to go down, split in half by a beam no one had ever seen before. The Admiral didn't even get a last word. And then the fleet began to break. Doyle watched it all unfold, silent, still, not surprised. He turned to his crew, men and women who'd been discarded like trash. Their faces were calm, some scared, but ready. "Target Devourer Prime's central cortex," he ordered. Weapons Officer Ban grunted. "Sir, our payload—" "I know. Load the Leviathan." The Leviathan. A prototype humans developed in secret. Too unstable, too dangerous, too human. The Alliance banned it, labeled it a threat to peace. Its use could destabilize subspace itself. There was only one, and it was in Doyle's hands. "Are we really doing this?" Ban asked. Doyle didn't answer. He stared at the burning wreckage of what used to be the galaxy's greatest fleet. No one expected the Eidolon to act. It crept forward, slow, unnoticed in the chaos. When the Leviathan was armed, the core of the ship dimmed. Lights flickered. The AI stuttered. "Firing solution locked," Ban whispered. "Do it!" The Eidolon fired one shot, 1. And the galaxy changed. The moment the Leviathan projectile left the Eidolon, the entire ship trembled. Lights failed across the deck. Gravity flickered, vanished for a breath, then snapped back like a punch. Every screen went dark. Alarms screamed, but no one moved. They were past the point of fear. In the vast silence of space, the Leviathan didn't look like much. No glowing core, no fancy particle trails, no dramatic hum. It was a black spear, almost invisible against the backdrop of stars. But it was moving fast, faster than light under a modified warp-rip envelope, an outlawed tech that bent the fabric of space, punching holes through dimensions. No one had ever used it in combat. No one had dared. Inside Devourer Prime, the Kevolith didn't notice it. Or maybe they did too late. Hive minds were powerful, but arrogant. They didn't see human weapons as threats. Their mistake. 32 seconds after launch, the Leviathan struck the core of Devourer Prime. It didn't explode immediately. First, it disappeared. The spear just phased into the ship's midsection. Then the world twisted. A wave of darkness spread from the impact site, an expanding ripple where light bent sideways and stars blurred like smears of wet paint. The laws of physics warped. Ships caught in the radius, both Kevolith and Allied, froze mid-flight, sucked into gravitational loops that shouldn't exist. Then came the soundless rupture. Devourer Prime folded in on itself. One instant, it was a moon-sized hive. The next, it was a collapsing singularity, dragging its own matter inward. The massive hull convulsed, organic plating peeling like dead skin. Screeches echoed through comms, raw and inhuman, like 1,000 souls being ripped apart. And then, it was gone. Not destroyed. Erased. Where the center of the Kevolith swarm once stood, there was nothing. No debris, no radiation. Just absence. The kind that made even machines hesitate. Doyle stood on the dimmed bridge of the Eidolon, eyes locked on the black void they'd left behind. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but exhaustion. That was everything they had. Every ounce of energy rerouted. The reactor was fried. Shields gone. Engines sputtering. "Report," he muttered. Ban stared at his console, eyes wide. Kevolith forces. Breaking formation. Scattering. Their hive link is down, completely. Communications crackled. At first, static. Then voices. Panicked, broken, desperate. Fragments of languages from across the Alliance. Kevolith Mother Core offline. Eidolon? Repeat. Did Eidolon fire that weapon? By the stars. What did the humans do? Doyle didn't answer them. He sat back in the old captain's chair, which creaked like everything else on this relic ship. "They won't ignore us now," said Ortega, the ship's grizzled engineer. "They can't." Doyle gave a tired laugh. "They'll either honor us or come for our heads." And he wasn't wrong. Hours later, as the remaining Kevolith fled into deep space, the Alliance Command scrambled to rewrite the narrative. Official reports twisted the story. Some claimed the Eidolon had simply assisted. Others refused to mention the ship at all. A few tried to give credit to a joint effort counterstrike that never happened. But the surviving fleet captains knew the raw data didn't lie. One shot, one ship, human. The Eidolon was ordered to return to Earth for debriefing and disarmament. That alone told Doyle everything. He ignored the summons. Instead, he took the ship into dark space. Far from prying eyes, far from politics. The crew had earned that. They weren't heroes. They were weapons now. Dangerous ones. The kind governments feared most. The kind that proved them wrong. Weeks later, in backwater comm hubs, stories began to spread. Whispers of the ghost ship. The warship no one took seriously. That destroyed a god. Some feared it. Others idolized it. But no one laughed anymore. They came for them fast. Not openly, of course. That would have made the Eidolon martyrs. No, they used politics first. Broadcasts, official memos, investigations opened by the Galactic Council, all wrapped in layers of law and protocol that stank of fear. The charge? Unauthorized use of banned technology, reckless endangerment, potential destabilization of subspace continuity. Captain Doyle didn't even bother to read the full list. It was a joke. The same council that begged for salvation now wanted to bury the method of their survival, just because it wasn't done their way. Because a human ship, falling apart and forgotten, had succeeded where their fleets had failed. But it was more than pride. They were scared. The Leviathan weapon hadn't just destroyed Devourer Prime. The aftermath readings showed permanent damage to the fabric of local space. That patch of void was now untouchable. Navigational black zone. Wormholes collapsed. Subspace tunnels redirected. Trade routes died overnight. They called it the burned wound. To Doyle, it was a reminder, a mark, proof that humanity could not only stand among the stars, they could leave scars on them. Now they were being hunted. The Eidolon limped through the edge sectors, uncharted systems, dying stars, and ruined mining belts. No repair docks would take them. No allies dared send supplies. Not publicly. A few sympathetic traders smuggled essentials through coded messages, but even that was thinning out. Ban, ever the realist, said it straight one night during a quiet shift. "They're gonna erase us, Cap. Quietly. First from the record, then from the galaxy." Doyle nodded. "I know." Ortega kicked back against the engine bay wall, wiping grease from his fingers. "Let 'em try. This old girl's still got teeth." Teeth, maybe, but no claws. The ship was dying. Slowly, piece by piece, power cores failing, navigation relying on manual plotting and stellar maps, so old they were nearly folklore. Half the crew was nursing injuries from the Leviathan's shockwave. The medical bay had 2 working beds and 1 overworked medic, but none of them asked to leave. Every single one of them had once been tossed aside, rejected, and now they were something else, living proof that humanity still had something no synthetic fleet or interspecies council could replicate: defiance. Then, one day, they intercepted the transmission. It was meant for someone else, a coded burst sent through a dead relay station. But the Eidolon's ancient hardware could read it. Something newer would have filtered it out as junk. It was a contract. A bounty. Captain Doyle, Class Omega threat, dead or alive. Vessel Eidolon to be destroyed on sight, by order of the Allied Council. The bounty wasn't just official. It was massive. "Omega threat," Ortega muttered. "That's reserved for bioweapons and planet killers." Ban's jaw tightened. "That's what we are to them now." Doyle just stared at the console. No emotion, just clarity. This wasn't about the Leviathan anymore. This was about erasing the idea that humans, with nothing but willpower and grit, could change the course of the universe in a single act. That terrified the Council more than the Kevolith ever did. "We're not running," he said. The crew looked at him, then at each other. Not one protested. "What's the plan?" Ban asked. Doyle walked over to the tactical display, fingers dragging across the star map. He circled a region deep within Kevolith space, still marked as Dead Zone. "We go back." "Back?" Ortega blinked. "That's suicide." "No," Doyle said calmly. "That's truth. Let the galaxy follow their stories. Let them hunt their traitor ship. But we go back to where it happened. We show them the wound, the silence, the hole we carved in the void. And if they catch us," Doyle smiled, bitter and hard, "then we make them remember why they should have been afraid the first time." The journey back to the dead zone was nothing short of a suicide march. The space around Kevalith territory wasn't just dangerous, it was haunted. The area had become something like a myth. Smugglers and mercs told stories of ships disappearing without a trace. Instruments failed without warning. Gravity wells appeared out of nowhere, swallowing convoys. And then there was the silence. Not one signal. Not even background radiation chatter. It was like something beyond death had taken root there. But Doyle didn't flinch. He charted the route manually, using old scout maps and half-legends from ghost ship logs. The crew didn't argue. Some of them were terrified, sure, but none of them backed out. They'd been branded traitors, threats to galactic stability. There was no turning back now. 2 jumps in, they picked up a shadow. A small interceptor, council make, sleek and armed. It followed at distance, just outside the range of the Eidolon's scanners, but Ortega spotted it with his gut, the way old sailors sensed storms before clouds even formed. "She's not engaging," Ortega said, "just watching." "Let her watch," Doyle muttered. 3 more jumps, and 2 more shadows appeared. This time, bounty hunters, freelancers, private, no emblems, no identification. Just fast, hungry ships with enough firepower to gut them in a straight fight. Still, they didn't engage. "They're waiting," Ban said, eyes cold. "For backup. Or an ambush." Doyle nodded. "Let them follow. We'll give them what they want." The final jump took them into what was once known as Delta Varn, the sector where Devourer Prime had died. It wasn't space anymore, not in the way they understood it. What greeted them was a void so black the stars around it looked dim. The wreckage of the old battle still floated in frozen silence, twisted council frigates, shattered Kevalith husks, debris frozen mid-spin as if time itself had failed to move forward. In the center, the burned wound pulsed faintly. It wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was pressure. The ship's sensors began to glitch almost instantly. Lights dimmed. Gravity buckled for 2 full minutes. Ortega slammed his fist into a control panel, cursing as half the ship's electrical relays blinked red. "This place isn't dead," Ban whispered. "It's wrong." Doyle stood at the observation bay, staring out at the emptiness he'd made. This was his legacy. Not a medal, not a monument. A wound. And it was beautiful. Behind them, the hunter ships broke formation. "They're moving in," Ortega said. "We've got 5 ships on intercept, armed, no communication." "No warning shots either," Ban added. "Of course not," Doyle said. "They're here to clean up a mistake." He turned back toward the command deck and gave one command. "Power up the secondary core. Reroute all remaining energy to weapons. We make our last stand here." Ban looked at him. "Sir, that'll burn the ship." "I know." Ortega nodded once. "Took the galaxy long enough to remember we existed. Let's make sure they don't forget again." The Eidolon groaned as the ancient systems overloaded. Plasma cores spat sparks. The lights flickered violently. The targeting systems were off by full degrees. Nothing about this would be clean. But it didn't need to be. It just needed to hurt. As the first hunter ship opened fire, the Eidolon fired back. Not for precision, but for fury. Its guns roared like something alive, something angry. Shields failed within seconds, and chunks of the hull tore free. But they held position. They fought, not because they thought they'd win, but because some truths deserve to be carved into the bones of the galaxy. The first hunter ship came in too fast. Maybe they thought it would be easy. An old warship, barely limping, standing still in a dead zone. Maybe they believed the Council's briefings, that the Eidolon was damaged, defenseless, no longer a threat. They were wrong. Doyle had rerouted every ounce of energy into the primary coil cannons. No shields, no fail-safes. The ship was overheating, the reactor screaming with every pulse. But when that first sleek attacker dropped into range, Eidolon opened fire with a fury born not of strategy, but of betrayal. The first shot punched clean through the enemy ship's core. There was no explosion, just a blinding flash, and then debris, floating, silent. The crew didn't cheer. They didn't have time. Another 2 ships flanked from opposite sides, sending synchronized missile salvos toward the Eidolon's exposed hull. "Countermeasures are dead," Ban warned. "No flares, no jammers. We'll have to take it." Doyle nodded. "Brace." The ship shook violently as the missiles hit. Fire tore through Corridor 6. Bulkhead 3 sealed automatically. Too late. 2 crew were lost instantly. Ortega roared over the intercom. "We've got a plasma breach in the rear subdeck. Engines won't hold another hit." "We don't need engines," Doyle growled. "Just targets." His voice cracked for the first time, not from fear, but from something colder. He was past hope now, past reasoning. The only thing left was purpose. He looked out the shattered viewport, eyes fixed on the remaining 3 enemy ships circling like vultures. "They think they're dealing with a wounded animal," he muttered. "Let's show them the teeth." One of the hunter ships, emboldened by the damage, moved in close, probably to deliver the final blow. That's when Doyle did something no tactician would ever consider. He shut down the core. For 3 full seconds, the Eidolon powered down entirely. Dead in the water. Lights gone. Weapons offline. To the hunters, it must have looked like the kill shot had worked. They advanced, all 3 at once. Doyle waited. "Now!" he barked. The auxiliary fusion core kicked in, not for power, but for ignition. The old ship roared back to life and unleashed a full blast from the undercarriage plasma array. An untested prototype weapon they'd never used before, wired by Ortega himself using scrap from salvaged wrecks. It fired sideways, uncontrolled, like a dying dragon breathing fire for the last time. The nearest 2 hunter ships were caught mid-turn. Their hulls melted instantly. The third veered off, panicking, but clipped debris and spun out, disappearing into the black with a final flash of warped metal. Then, silence again. The Eidolon floated, gutted, bleeding sparks into the void. Doyle slumped in the command chair, barely breathing. Systems were failing. Oxygen was thin. The medbay was down to manual bandages and hope. Ortega had burns on half his face. Ban had shrapnel in his side. Half the crew were either unconscious or trapped under collapsed beams. Still, no one asked to surrender. But something was coming. Not ships, not signals, something else. In the heart of the dead zone, the burned wound pulsed again. The sensors flickered and then flatlined entirely. Outside the window, space rippled, like the surface of black water disturbed by something ancient beneath it. "What the hell is that?" Ortega whispered, leaning on a melted console. "It's the thing we woke up," Doyle said, voice hollow. The Leviathan had left more than just a scar. It had opened something, and now something was looking back. A dark shape emerged from the void, massive, silent, angular like a starship, but wrong. It had no engines, no lights, just geometry that bent in ways eyes weren't supposed to understand. It hovered there, watching. The Eidolon made no move. Then, without sound or warning, the strange entity pulsed once, and the wreckage floating in the zone disintegrated. Every ship, every shard, every remnant from the battle, gone, erased like dust on a screen. Except for Eidolon, it left them untouched. And then it vanished, slipping back into the void without a trace. No one spoke. They knew somehow that they had become part of something the galaxy was not ready to understand. Something older than Kevolith, older than war, and it had chosen to let them live. The news didn't travel by signal. It traveled by fear. 3 days after the incident at the Dead Zone, long-range patrols from the Eutheri fleet picked up anomalies. Entire sectors gone dark. No debris, no signs of battle, just silence. The kind that made veteran commanders pause and recheck their orders. The bounty hunters who had tailed the Eidolon never returned. Doyle had intercepted whispers, buried in encrypted black market transmissions. The drift wasn't empty. It had become a dumping ground for experiments, war tech, and political problems the Council didn't want traced. A scrapyard of secrets. Exactly the kind of place the Eidolon was made for. The closer they got, the more unstable the space became. Microgravity wells pulsed in unpredictable bursts. Time distortion pockets caused parts of the ship to desync for seconds at a time, but the crew kept pushing forward. They'd stopped fearing the unknown. What scared them now was the familiar. The Council, the clean-cut lies, the polished broadcasts talking peace while they slaughtered truth in back rooms. The Urian drift appeared without warning. No beacon, no station comms, just wreckage. Hundreds of dead ships floated in lazy spirals. Some still had power cores blinking. Others were half consumed by experimental nanogrowths that pulsed like infected flesh. And at the center, like a rotten heart, was Station Bastion 12, an old Fortress-class command hub, sealed off, dark as pitch. The Eidolon moved in silently. "Power readings?" Doyle asked. Ban checked twice. "Minimal, but there's something underneath the station, buried deep. A massive energy signature, unstable." "Could be a reactor," Ortega said. "Could be another Leviathan," Doyle muttered. And that's when the Eidolon's external comms triggered. On their own. A voice crackled through. "Not robotic. Not alien. Human. Do not engage Station Bastion 12. You are not authorized. Stand down immediately." It was a Council handler. Cold voice. No emotion. "Doyle," the voice continued, "you've already stepped beyond recovery. Don't go further. You think you're a hero. You're not. You're a trigger. Step back. We're not your enemy." Doyle leaned forward toward the comm unit. "You made us your enemy the day you tried to bury us." A pause. Then the voice grew darker. "There are things in that station that were never meant to surface. Even the Council fears them. If you go in there, you're going to break something worse than the Kevolith." "Good," Doyle said, his voice sharp as a blade. "Then I'm right where I belong." The docking clamps shrieked as the Eidolon latched onto Bastion 12's outer ring. The station groaned under its own weight, like it resented being disturbed. Its hull was half devoured by corrosion, and the airlocks hadn't been opened in decades. But they opened now, automatically, like the place was waiting for them. "Still no resistance?" Ban asked, his weapon tight in his grip. Doyle checked the scanner, still cold. No life signs, no security drones, no automated defenses. Just silence. Ortega muttered, "Feels like walking into a graveyard that knows it's being visited." They moved in 2 squads. Doyle led one, Ban the other. Ortega stayed on the ship to keep it breathing. Inside, Bastion 12 was worse than anything they expected. The halls were warped, literally. Twisted metal corridors bent at odd angles as if something had melted space around them. Lights flickered erratically. Some sections had gravity, others didn't. Time seemed out of sync. Footsteps echoed too long. Voices from the other team crackled over the comms before they spoke. They weren't alone. Not exactly. There were remnants, ghosts in the machinery, frozen test subjects, floating in half-collapsed cryopods. Some looked human. Others didn't. Doyle passed one chamber sealed with 6 inches of translucent alloy. Inside was something humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, no eyes, no mouth, just a body built to kill and a sense of rage you could feel through the glass. This wasn't just a scrapyard, Ban said when they regrouped near the lower levels. It was a lab. Doyle nodded grimly. A grave built for ideas too dangerous to bury on paper. Then they found the core. It wasn't a reactor. It was a Leviathan prototype, larger, more refined, encased in a shell of anti-temporal alloy. The walls around it were covered in glyphs, not alien, but forbidden. Blacklisted human AI code, outlawed decades ago. Thought logic constructs. The kind of software that could rewrite a mind mid-thought. But the worst part was the recordings. Dozens of logs, hidden files, videos of experiments, of political prisoners turned into test subjects, of failed Leviathan trials that tore ships apart in simulations, of conversations between high-ranking council officials who signed off on everything. The Leviathan had never been an act of desperation. It had been part of a long-term weapons program, Project Eidolon. The name hit like a punch. Doyle stared at the logo burned into one of the consoles, a stylized skull split in half by a crack of light. They were never a mistake. They were a test. He clenched his fists, breathing hard as the betrayal settled deeper than bone. Every crew member on the Eidolon, every exile, every reject, had been thrown together on purpose. Not because they were broken, but because they were useful if they died in silence. And when they hadn't, the council panicked. "You seeing this?" Ortega's voice crackled through the comms. "Every second," Doyle said. "Download it all. Every file, every word. We're going to broadcast this to every node in the galaxy. You think they'll let us get out of here?" Doyle looked at the now active Leviathan in the core chamber. "I don't plan on getting out." Back on the Eidolon, Ortega initiated the system link. They uploaded everything. Ban armed the ship's last pulse cannon to fire on Bastion 12's core if necessary. And then Doyle did the unthinkable. He rerouted the Eidolon's final energy reserves into the communications array, not to call for help, but to blast the truth across every corner of the galaxy. Pirate hubs, resistance cells, fringe colonies, even rival species. The Council's sins, the origin of the Leviathan, Project Eidolon itself. They sent it all. Within moments, the ship's power dropped to near zero. Enemy ships blinked in from subspace. The Black Fleet had arrived. 30 warships, bristling with weapons, surrounding the station like vultures over a carcass. "This is it," Ortega said softly. "No more running." "No," Doyle agreed. He stood in the bridge, worn, bleeding, but proud. They thought they made a weapon. He looked out at the enemy ships preparing to fire. But we became a memory. He turned to Ban, who gave a nod. "Trigger the overload." The Leviathan ignited. Not to kill, not to erase, but to mark. The explosion was controlled, pushed out through subspace frequencies. It didn't destroy the fleet. It blinded them. Overrode every single one of their AI systems. Fried targeting sensors, jammed navigation. And in that window, the truth spread. The galaxy saw the lie. They saw the Eidolon. Not as a threat, not as a traitor, but as the ship that refused to die silent. When the light faded, Bastion 12 was gone. So was the Eidolon. No wreckage, no bodies, just a scar in the stars, and a name that would never be forgotten. The warship no one took seriously until it made history in one strike, and in the end, made the galaxy remember what it means to fear humanity.